now. Right. So good. So the Krylogic Matrix. So here's the deal. If you look at the strategic collaboration quadrant in the corner there, and you discuss the case FlyCloud, you all will agree that FlyCloud and its relationship, say with their strategic supplier called North Star, will actually be in that quadrant. So North Star will be in the quadrant to the top right. You all agree with that, right? North Star will be in that quadrant. Why North Star will be in that quadrant? I'll tell you why. North Star will be in that quadrant because one, the risk is high. Why is the risk high? North Star and the other organization, right, that supplies them with major spare parts are more or less the only companies that can provide FlyCloud with those spare parts. All right. And then if you go to the bottom, you would see value. Value is high. Major aircraft spares are not cheap, it's very costly. So it's important for FlyCloud to have a strategic relationship with North Star, for example. Now, what does that 80% represent? That 80% represents or likely represents 80% in spend, right? 80 or 90% in spend. So usually your strategic vendors, you tend to spend more money with them, right? And in terms of, if you want to look at the numbers game, strategic vendors may may not contribute to a large percentage of your supplier listing, right? Might be 20, 30%. All right. So 80% in spend. But when we look at the other side of the spectrum, other side of the matrix, let's look at the other end where we see in 20%, all right? That is where you will find FlyCloud's non-strategic suppliers. With me in that, FlyCloud's non-strategic vendors will be down there. You all hearing me on that one? You hearing me? Testing 1, 2, 3, testing 1, 2, 3. I'm saying that FlyCloud's non-strategic suppliers will be in the bottom left corner. Why? Why is that? I'll tell you why. Usually, your non-strategic or your nuisance suppliers, let's say suppliers who are supplying you with, let's say, consumables, toiletries, and so on, right? Particularly in the case of this company, right? In terms of value, the value is on the lower end, right? So FlyCloud is spending less money there with those suppliers, whoever is supplying them with toiletries and consumables. In terms of risk, the risk is also low. Why? It's a numbers game. There are likely to be a large number or a large pool of suppliers who can supply FlyCloud with those low value items. Now, what does that 20% represent? That 20% represents 20% in spend. All right? You with me on that? Testing 1, 2, 3. That 20% represents 20% in spend. All right? And I can flip it as well. There's an 80% in that quadrant too. And I'll tell you what that 80% is. The 80% is likely to be 80% of their suppliers, right? All right. And I can flip the 80%, the 80% to the top, we can flip it and we can apply a 20%. The 20% will represent 20% in terms of the number of suppliers, right? So do a report, run a report on your suppliers, and you will recognize that the suppliers that you're spending the most amount of your money with, right, is not necessarily a large pool of suppliers. You with me on that? And you're likely to be spending 80% of your money with them, right? 80 or 90% maybe. Testing 1, 2, 3. So the Krylogic Matrix helps you organize your supply relationships. All right, testing 1, 2, 3, testing 1, 2, 3. Now there are other quadrants. Let's say there's a quadrant called bottleneck. Okay, so for bottleneck we have risk, high, value low. So what is that about? Why would the risk be high and the value low? I'll explain. Um, there might be instances where, could be in the case of Fly Cloud, where they may have suppliers, right? Who they may have a large pool of suppliers, yes, but out of that large pool, maybe a few suppliers may have an exceptional product, or their work or their maintenance or their service might be exceptional. It might be one supplier out of a large number, right? So Flight Cloud may take their equipment to be calibrated at that supplier's premises. All right, you with me now? Even though the value of the spend might be low, the value of the spend might be low, yes, but the service maybe that vendor provides, or maybe that particular vendor may have may have a special warranty or something like that, right? So where does the risk come in? The risk comes in when you could note when this vendor cannot supply you, right, for whatever reason, right? So I'm seeing something here. Gilbert is saying there are circumstances where a company chooses to deal with a single, excellent, that's true, non-strategic supplier despite the presence of many suppliers in the same line of operation. Yes, yes. And that arrangement, that is actually called single sourcing. So that is a single source arrangement you just described there. Good point. But I'm not really talking about single sourcing. I'm talking about, sometimes you have several vendors providing a service, but most times they may want to go to put to one, not that you have a special contract with that vendor. It's not that you have a contract with that vendor. It's not a single sourcing contract. It's just that that particular vendor you prefer because their work or their product might be a little better, or it's often better than others. You understand what I'm saying, Gilbert? Gilbert, you understand what I'm saying? I'm not necessarily talking about a single sourcing arrangement, which you just described there, which is good. What you described there is something called is a strategy called single sourcing. And why we would do that, I think we spoke about that before. Single sourcing is done for leverage purposes, right? In other words, rather than buying it from 10, 20 suppliers, if you giving all the business to one vendor, will give you economies of scale benefits. It will bring all the focus and attention to your business, right? And that's why companies do that, among other things. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a case where this supplier out of a group of suppliers just has may have a better service. Maybe the material of that supplier's product might be better. Things like that, right? But if the thing is this, if that supplier is unable to supply, you have a problem, right? So that's why we say risk is high, right? It is not that you can't use another vendor, but this supplier just their work, or their molding or whatever fits better with your um, design or your product. Now there's another quadrant called leverage. Let's look at leverage. So leverage, we see here value high and risk is low. So what is that about? Value high and risk is low. So we could look at them. Let me read a bit for you. Let's look at leverage. And maybe I should look at bottleneck. I'll just read bottleneck for you just to convince you. Bottleneck. So the item in this quadrant represents problems for the buyer, since the items, although not significant in individual value terms, represent significant risk to the business if supply is interrupted. The items are often unique. See what I said? The items are often unique in some way. Sometimes this will be because of the supplier, or maybe the supplier has a monopoly and there are no other sources available. Okay, that might be the case. This is not healthy for the supplier. This is not healthy. Another healthy place for the buyer to be, right? And you may take steps to reduce the risk of that, or to get yourself out of that quadrant, right? Let's look at leverage. Let's look at leverage. Leverage. Traditional skills of finding alternative sources, retendering contracts, pressurizing and negotiating for reduced supply costs are the priorities in this quadrant. Right, so remember, you heard that term leverage. So you have the leverage, meaning that you have the purchasing power, you have the buying power over the supplier, right? So you're gonna flex your muscles. So this is the area where buyers are probably most experienced. Given the high value of the individual items, savings in supply costs on this range of items are possibly large and effort relatively low risk because of the alternatives in the marketplace. All right, so let's go to leverage. So let's go to leverage. So let's just look at it. See, risk is low. Why the risk is low? Risk is low because you have alternatives. You may have alternative materials. Let's say carpeting, right? You have to install carpet at a hotel. There are so many different grades of carpet, grades, color, style. If you want, you can replace the carpet. You don't need to go with carpet. You can go with vinyl. You can go with different things, right? Wood, whatever, right? So because of that large or vast or wide um, content, right? That is what gives you the leverage, right? So even though the value might be high, the risk is low because you have the leverage, because you have the purchasing power, you have the buying power. But if you look at risk is low, I said. If you look at the strategic collaboration, you don't have leverage there. Testing 1 to 3. You agree with me? You don't have leverage there because, like, as in the case of a North Star, for example, and like Rolls Royce and these companies that supply aircraft power plant, um, you don't have much, you don't have leverage there really. So you could only go to them if your aircraft is configured to operate those units. Testing 1 2 3, testing 1 2 3. So you all understand the Krylogic Matrix, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Are you with me on the Krylogic? Are you with me? Guys, are you with me on the Krylogic Matrix? The Krylogic Matrix is a simple model. It's a model that helps the buyer better organize their relationships. In other words, the buyer will know which relationship to have with their suppliers. And this is done by putting the suppliers or recognizing that the suppliers or that a particular supplier must fit or will fit into a particular quadrant. With me now? They need to know where to fit your suppliers. Once you know where to fit your suppliers, then you will know which relationship to apply. I repeat, once you know where to fit your vendors, you will know what relationship comes after. Testing 1 2 3, testing 1 2 3. You all got that? The Peter Kraljic matrix.